The Calrithian warship cut through the darkness of space, its hull gleaming under the distant stars. Commander Zaxel stood on the bridge, his 4 eyes fixed on the view screen ahead. The planet Epsilon 7 floated in the distance, a small brown world at the edge of Allied territory. Something was wrong. The orbital defense platform should have been silent by now. The Vex Thor swarm had attacked it 3 days ago, with overwhelming force. Intelligence reports said the human garrison had evacuated. The station should be dead, captured, or destroyed. But the sensors told a different story. "Commander, I'm detecting weapons fire," said the sensor officer, her voice confused. "The platform's railguns are still active." Zaxel leaned forward. "That's impossible." The Vex's Thor deployed over 2,000 warriors to that station. "Zax?" "Confirmed, sir. Energy signatures show active combat. Someone is still fighting." The bridge fell silent. Every officer knew what the Vex Thor were. They were a warrior species, born to fight. When they attacked with full force, nothing survived. Certainly not a small defense platform that had been under siege for 3 days. "Get me a visual," Zaxel ordered. The main screen flickered. The orbital platform came into view, and the crew gasped. The station was a wreck. Entire sections had been blown open to space. Fires burned in compartments where atmosphere still remained. Debris floated around it like a cloud of metal rain. Scorch marks covered every surface. And yet, the guns kept firing. Bright flashes erupted from the weapons arrays, targeting the Vex Thor ships that circled the station like predators around wounded prey. The alien vessels took hits, their shields flaring. Some broke off, damaged. Others pressed forward, only to be driven back by precise fire. "How many defenders are left?" Zaxel asked. The sensor officer worked her console, running scan after scan. Her face showed disbelief. "Sir, I'm only reading one life sign. Human, male. Located in the main command center." "1," Zaxel repeated. "Run the scan again." "I've run it 3 times, Commander. There's only one person on that station." Zaxel felt his blood run cold. One human had held that platform for 3 days against a Vex's Thor assault force. It defied every tactical principle he had ever learned. It shouldn't be possible. "Deploy scout ships," he ordered. "I want eyes on that station. And try to establish communication." 2 small craft launched from the Calrithian warship, speeding toward the battered platform. As they approached, the extent of the damage became clearer. Whole sections of the station had collapsed. Bodies floated in space. Most of them, Vex's Thor warriors, in their distinctive battle armor. The number was staggering. "Commander," the communications officer said, "I'm getting a response. Audio only. The human's name is Sergeant Kyle Morrison. Put him through." Static filled the bridge. Then a human voice came through. It was rough, tired, but steady. "This is Sergeant Morrison. Epsilon 7 Defense Platform. Identify yourself. This is Commander Zaxel of the Calrithian 3rd Fleet. We received your distress signal. What is your status, Sergeant?" There was a pause. Then Morrison spoke again. "Status is holding, Commander. Station's at 20% power. Life support is failing in sections 4 through 9. I've got maybe 6 hours of air left in the command center. Ammunition is critical. I've got maybe 6 hours. I've got maybe 6 hours. I've got maybe 6 hours." Zaxel listened to the calm report with growing amazement. The human spoke as if he were filing a routine status update, not fighting for his life against impossible odds. "Sergeant, where is the rest of your unit?" "Evacuated, sir. 72 hours ago, when the Vex Thor began their main assault, we had civilian transports leaving the planet. They needed time to reach the jump point. Someone had to stay and keep the orbital guns active. And you volunteered." "Yes, sir." "How many Vex Thor have you engaged?" Another pause. "I stopped counting at 3,000. Commander, The station's automated systems logged every kill until the main computer took damage. After that, I've been too busy to keep track. Zaxel looked at his officers. They stared back, expressions mirroring his own shock. 3,000. 1 human. 3 days. Sergeant Morrison. We can extract you. My Marines can. Negative, Commander. The human's voice was firm. The Vex Thor are regrouping for another push. I can see their ships on sensors. If I abandon this position, they'll take the platform and use it against your fleet when you enter orbit. You're injured. You're running out of supplies. This is suicide. With respect, sir, it's only suicide if I fail. And I don't plan on failing. The communications officer muted the channel and turned to Zaxel. Commander, he's clearly in shock. Humans require sleep. He's been awake for over 70 hours. His judgment is compromised. But Zaxel wasn't so sure. He had fought alongside humans before. He knew their reputation. They were stubborn, reckless, and utterly unwilling to accept defeat. Other species called it insanity. Humans called it determination. Show me the station logs, Zaxel said. Everything from the past 3 days. The data streamed across his console. Zaxel read through it, his heart's beating faster with each entry. Morrison hadn't just survived. He had fought with tactical brilliance. When ammunition ran low, he used the station itself as a weapon. He had collapsed corridors to create choke points, vented atmosphere to flush out boarding parties, rigged damaged reactors as traps, used enemy weapons when his own ran dry. The man had turned a dying station into a lethal fortress. And now he was making his final stand. Sir, the sensor officer called out. The Vex Thor are moving. Looks like a major assault forming. At least 50 ships converging on the platform. Zaxel made his decision. He opened a channel to his fleet. All ships, battle formation. Prepare to engage the Vex Thor swarm. We're going to support that platform. His second officer stepped forward. Commander, with respect, we should wait for reinforcements. 1 human shouldn't dictate fleet strategy. Zaxel turned to face him. That 1 human has. The Vex Thor ships moved like a swarm of insects, their formation tightening around the damaged platform. Kyle Morrison watched them on the cracked view screen, his eyes tracking each vessel. 50 ships. Maybe more. His tired mind struggled to count them all. He had 18 rounds left for his rifle. After that, he would have to improvise again. The command center around him looked like a battlefield. Broken equipment lay everywhere. Emergency lights cast red shadows across the walls. The air smelled of burned metal and smoke. Kyle's armor was cracked in 3 places, the breech seals barely holding. His left arm hurt when he moved it. Probably broken. He couldn't remember. When that happened, 73 hours. That's how long he had been awake. His body screamed for sleep, but the stimulant injectors kept him moving. 4 shots so far. Medical guidelines said 3 was the maximum safe dose. He had stopped caring about safe doses around hour 40. Come on, he muttered to himself, watching the Vex Thor formation. Make your move. The communications console crackled. Commander Zaxel's voice came through. Sergeant Morrison, my fleet is in position. We can provide covering fire for your evacuation. Kyle almost laughed. Evacuation. As if he could just walk out of here. The Vex Thor controlled every corridor between the command center and the docking bay. He had sealed most of the passages himself to slow them down. Negative, Commander. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not going anywhere. This position gives me control of the orbital guns. If I leave, you lose that advantage. You're 1 man, Sergeant. You can't hold forever. I don't need forever, sir. I just need long enough. Kyle cut the connection and focused on his sensors. The Vex Thor were moving now, their assault ships breaking formation. They were coming in fast, probably planning to board from multiple points at once. Standard swarm tactics, Overwhelm the defender with numbers. He had dealt with that before. Kyle triggered the command sequence he had programmed 2 hours ago. Across the station, explosive bolts fired. 3 entire sections of the platform detached, drifting away into space. The Vex's Thor ships that had been approaching those sections suddenly found their targets gone. Several collided with the debris. Kyle allowed himself a grim smile. That bought him maybe 10 minutes. His console showed the remaining station defenses. 2 railgun turrets still operational. 1 missile battery, with 4 shots left. The main reactor, at 30% power, and dropping. Structural integrity at 15%. Life support. Failing in all sections, except the command center. By every measure, the station was dying, but it wasn't dead yet. The first Vex Thor boarding pod hit the station's hull with a metallic clang that echoed through the walls. Then, another. Then, 5 more. Kyle checked his rifle one last time and moved to the command center entrance. He had fortified this position as best he could. Barricades made from broken equipment. Emergency bulkheads ready to slam shut. The narrow corridor approaching the center created a kill zone that would force the Vex Thor to come at him 1 or 2 at a time. The door at the far end exploded inward. Vex Thor warriors poured through, their weapons blazing. Kyle opened fire. His first shots were precise. 2 aliens down. 3. 4. The corridor became a chaos of weapons, fire, and smoke. Kyle moved on instinct, his training taking over where conscious thought failed. Duck. Fire. Reload. Fire again. A plasma bolt scorched past his helmet. Another hit his shoulder armor, and he felt the heat through the breach. Kyle ignored the pain and kept shooting. The Vex Thor fell, but more came behind them. When his rifle clicked empty, Kyle grabbed the plasma cutter from his belt. He had taken it from the engineering bay hours ago. It wasn't meant to be a weapon, but at close range, it would do. A Vex Thor warrior charged through the smoke. Kyle waited until it was close, then triggered the cutter. The superheated beam sliced through the alien's armor. It fell, and Kyle was already moving, looking for the next target. The battle became a blur. Kyle fought with the desperate efficiency of a man who knew he had nothing to lose. When the plasma cutter died, he used a piece of broken metal bar. When that was knocked from his hands, he used his fists. A Vex Thor grabbed him, its 4 arms trying to crush his armor. Kyle headbutted it, feeling his helmet crack. The alien staggered back, and Kyle grabbed its own weapon, turning it on its owner. The shooting stopped. Kyle stood in the corridor, breathing hard, surrounded by bodies. His armor's medical system screamed warnings at him. Multiple injuries detected. Blood loss. Concussion. Stimulant levels critical. He stumbled back to the command center and collapsed into the chair. The view screen showed Commander Zaxel's fleet engaging the Vex's Thor ships. Bright flashes of weapons fire lit up space. The Calrithians were good fighters, pushing the swarm back. But the Vex Thor weren't giving up. More ships appeared on sensors, jumping in from deeper space. They had committed to taking this platform, and they were throwing everything at it. Kyle's console beeped. Incoming message. Not from Zaxel this time. Different frequency. Military encryption code. Human. Morrison, this is Captain Lisa Grant of the destroyer Valiant. Do you copy? Kyle sat up straighter despite his pain. He knew that voice. Captain Grant had been his commanding officer 3 years ago, before he transferred to border defense. She was tough, smart, and didn't accept excuses. I copy, Captain. Good to hear from you. I'm 2 hours out, Kyle. We received the emergency beacon. Hold on. Help is coming. 2 hours, Kyle repeated. He looked at his power readings. The reactor was failing faster now. He had maybe 90 minutes before everything shut down. I'll be here, ma'am. That's an order, Sergeant. Don't you dare die on me. Wouldn't dream of it, Captain. The connection ended. Kyle checked his ammunition situation again. He had scavenged some Vex Thor weapons, but they were designed for alien hands. Awkward to use. Still, they would shoot. The sensors showed another wave forming. The Vex Thor weren't stopping. They couldn't afford to. If they pulled back now, they would lose too much face. Their warrior culture demanded victory. Kyle understood that. He had his own demands. He would hold this station. Not because command ordered it. Not because it was strategic. He would hold it because 17,000 civilians had escaped on those transports. Families. Children. All children. People who deserved to live. He had volunteered to buy them time. He had bought them 3 days. Now he just needed to buy them 2 more hours. Kyle stood up, ignoring the protests from his battered body. He picked up a Vex Thor rifle, feeling its unfamiliar weight. His vision swam for a moment, then cleared. The stimulants were wearing off. But he had one more injector. Medical guidelines be damned. He pressed the injector to his neck and felt the chemical rush hit his system. His heart rate spiked. His hands steadied. The pain receded to a distant echo. The command center's proximity alarms blared. More boarding pods incoming. The Vex Thor were attacking again, and this time, they were coming with everything they had. Commander Zaxel watched the tactical display with growing concern. The Vex's Thor kept coming, wave after wave. His fleet had destroyed dozens of their ships, but more arrived to replace them. The swarm had committed fully to this battle, all because of one human. "Sir, the platform's power is dropping," reported the sensor officer. "I estimate 30 minutes before total failure." Zaxel's jaw tightened. 30 minutes. Captain Grant's ship was still 90 minutes away. Morrison couldn't possibly hold that long. "Get me the sergeant," he ordered. The communication opened, but this time there was no immediate response. Only the sound of weapons, fire, and explosions. Then, Morrison's voice came through, strained and breathless. "Little busy right now, Commander. Sergeant, you need to fall back. My Marines can fight their way to you, but we need time to..." Negative. More weapons fire. A grunt of pain. "The Vex Thor control the lower decks. If your Marines try to reach me, they'll be cut off. Stay with your fleet. I'll handle things here. You're out of ammunition. You're injured. The station is dying. Then I better work fast." The connection went silent. Zaxel slammed his fist on the command console. His second officer, Velreese, moved closer. "Commander, we should withdraw. This position isn't worth the losses we're taking." Zaxel turned to him sharply. "That human has held this station for 3 days. He's fought alone against thousands. And you want to abandon him?" I want to save our fleet, sir. One life against hundreds of our ships. One life that has shown more courage than any soldier I've ever seen." Zaxel looked back at the view screen, where the battered platform continued to fight. "Prepare a boarding team. Maximum force. We're going in." On the platform, Kyle Morrison had run out of ammunition entirely. The Vex Thor weapon he had been using finally overheated and died. He threw it at the nearest alien warrior, and drew the only thing he had left, a combat knife. 5 Vex Thor rushed him at once. Kyle met them in the narrow corridor, turning the confined space to his advantage. He couldn't match their strength, but he was faster. The knife flashed in the emergency lighting, finding gaps in their armor. One alien fell. Then another. But there were too many. A blow caught Kyle in the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. His armor's breach seals finally failed. Air began to hiss out. Kyle triggered the emergency patch system. Foam sprayed across the cracks, sealing them temporarily. It wouldn't last long, but it didn't need to. Nothing needed to last long anymore. He grabbed a piece of broken pipe from the floor and swung it like a club. The metal connected with a Vex Thor helmet, and the alien went down. Kyle felt his ribs crack from another hit, but kept moving. "Stop moving and you're dead. Keep moving, and you might survive 1 more minute." 1 more minute was all he needed. 1 minute at a time. The command center behind him still had power. The orbital guns still fired. That's all that mattered. A Vex Thor blade sliced across his leg. Kyle fell to one knee, then rolled aside as the alien tried to finish him. He came up inside its guard and drove the knife up through the weak point under its jaw. The creature gurgled and collapsed. Kyle stood again, barely. His vision tunneled. The stimulants were failing. His body was shutting down. He could feel it happening. Feel himself fading. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. More Vex Thor appeared at the end of the corridor. Kyle counted 6, maybe 7. His eyes weren't focusing properly anymore. He raised the knife, knowing it wouldn't be enough. Knowing this was the end. But if he was going to die, he would die fighting. That was the deal. That was the promise he made when he volunteered to stay behind. The Vex Thor charged. Then the wall beside them exploded. Calrithian Marines poured through the breach, their weapons blazing. The Vex Thor turned to face this new threat, and Kyle saw his chance. He lunged forward, driving the knife into the nearest alien's back. It fell, and the Calrithians advanced. Their formation perfect, their fire disciplined. Within seconds, the corridor was clear. A Calrithian officer approached Kyle, his 4 eyes wide with concern. "Sergeant Morrison, I am Squad Leader Tralvan. Commander Zaxel sent us to extract you." Kyle shook his head. "The command center. I need to stay in the command center. The guns. The guns will continue to function. We can operate them. You need medical attention." "No." Kyle pushed past him, stumbling toward the command center entrance. "You don't understand. The Vex Thor are regrouping. They're going to try one more push. I can see it on the sensors. One more push, and..." His legs gave out. Kyle hit the floor hard, and the world spun around him. Strong hands caught him before he could fall completely. The Calrithian Marines lifted him carefully. "Get him to the medical bay," Tralvan ordered. "I'll take command of the platform defenses." Kyle tried to protest, but his voice wouldn't work anymore. His body had finally reached its limit. Everything hurt. Everything was shutting down. As the Marines carried him through the damaged corridors, Kyle's eyes drifted to the view screen one last time. The Vex Thor fleet was indeed regrouping. One final, massive assault. They were throwing everything at the platform now, determined to take it, regardless of cost. But Captain Grant's destroyer had arrived early. The Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel, right in the middle of the Vexis Thor formation. Weapons already firing. The surprise was total. Vex Thor ships exploded under the sudden assault. More human ships followed. An entire battle group, jumping in to support their lone soldier. They had come for him. They had all come. The Calrithian fleet coordinated with the human ships, and together they tore into the Vex Thor swarm. The aliens, caught between 2 fleets and still taking fire from the platform, finally broke. Their ships turned and fled, jumping away into faster-than-light travel. The battle was over. Kyle Morrison had held the platform for 75 hours. He had faced thousands of Vex Thor warriors. He had fought with guns, with improvised weapons, with his bare hands. He had stayed conscious through injuries that should have killed him, and he had won. In the Calrithian medical bay, doctors swarmed around him. Their scanners showed readings that horrified them. Multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, severe concussion, stimulant poisoning, malnutrition and dehydration. Second-degree burns across 40% of his body. "How is he even alive?" one doctor asked. The chief medical officer had no answer. By all medical logic, the human should have collapsed days ago, should have died from his injuries, should have been overwhelmed by the Vex Thor. But he hadn't. Commander Zaxel stood outside the medical bay, watching through the window as the doctors worked. Captain Grant stood beside him, her face tight with worry. "Will he survive?" Zaxel asked. He's made it this far, Grant said quietly. If Kyle Morrison can hold a station for 3 days, against impossible odds, he can survive a few injuries. I've never seen anything like what he did. Grant nodded. That's because you've never had to. Humans don't fight like this unless we have no choice. When we do, when everything is on the line. She paused. We don't know how to quit. Zaxel thought about the past 3 days. About the lone soldier who refused to retreat. About the stand that had saved thousands of lives. About the courage that defied every logical explanation. Your species terrifies me, Captain, he said honestly. Grant smiled grimly. We terrify ourselves sometimes, Commander. But that's what makes us good allies. When you need someone to stand beside you, we'll be there, and we won't run. The medical bay was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitors. Kyle Morrison had been unconscious for 3 days. The doctors said his body was healing. But slowly, too slowly for alien standards. They didn't understand how human biology worked under extreme stress. Captain Lisa Grant visited every day. She would sit beside his bed and talk to him, even though he couldn't hear her. She told him about the transports he had saved, about the civilians who had made it safely to the inner colonies, about the children who were alive because of him. 17,000 people, Kyle, she said softly. You saved them all. On the 4th day, Kyle's eyes opened. The first thing he saw was the white ceiling of the medical bay. The second thing was Captain Grant leaning over him, her expression a mixture of relief and something else. Anger, maybe. Or fear. Welcome back, Sergeant, she said. Kyle tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. A Calrithian nurse quickly brought water. He drank slowly, each swallow painful. How long? He managed to ask. 4 days since we pulled you off that station. You've been in critical condition, but the doctors say you'll recover. Eventually, Kyle tried to sit up. Pain shot through his entire body, and he fell back with a gasp. Grant put a hand on his shoulder. Don't move. You have 3 broken ribs, a fractured arm, severe burns, and about a dozen other injuries. You're lucky to be alive. The platform? Destroyed. The Vexthor came back after we evacuated everyone. They blew it apart rather than let us keep it. But it doesn't matter. We held the sector. Thanks to you. Kyle closed his eyes. The platform was gone. All that fighting, all that pain, and the station was just debris now. But Grant was right. It didn't matter. The mission had been to buy time. He had bought time. The civilians were safe. That was what mattered. The transports, he said. Did they all make it? Grant's expression softened. Every single one. 17,000 civilians reached the inner colonies safely. Not a single casualty. Because you gave them the time they needed. Kyle felt something tight in his chest loosen. He had done it. The mission was complete. Good, he whispered. Over the next few days, Kyle learned about what happened while he was unconscious. The story of his stand had spread across the Allied territories. News networks were calling him a hero. The Calrithian government wanted to give him their highest military honor. Human Command was processing a promotion. Kyle didn't care about any of it. What bothered him was that he couldn't remember parts of the battle. The last day was a blur. He remembered fighting, remembered the pain, but the details were gone. The doctors said it was normal after extreme trauma. The brain protected itself by forgetting. Commander Zaxel visited on the 5th day. He brought with him a data pad containing the full battle logs from the platform. Kyle read through them in silence, seeing the numbers that proved what he had done. 75 hours of continuous combat. 4,217 Vexthor warriors killed. 1,843 confirmed enemy ship hits from the orbital guns he had operated. 112 separate engagements in the station corridors. 1 human, 1 station, 3 days. These numbers don't make sense, Kyle said quietly. I thought the same thing, Zaxel replied. But I watched the security footage. I saw what you did. Every tactical decision you made was correct. Every defense you set up was optimal. You turned that dying station into a fortress. I was just doing my job. Zaxel's 4 eyes studied him carefully. Sergeant Morrison, I have been a soldier for 40 cycles. I have seen many battles. I have never seen anything like what you accomplished. This wasn't just doing your job. This was beyond anything we thought possible. Kyle looked away. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. He felt like a soldier who had survived when maybe he shouldn't have. I volunteered, he said simply. Someone had to stay. It happened to be me. But why didn't you retreat when the situation became impossible? Kyle was quiet for a long moment. How could he explain it? How could he make an alien understand something that he barely understood himself? Because retreat wasn't an option, he finally said. Those transports needed 6 hours. I could give them 6 hours. So I did. You gave them 75. I gave them what they needed. Zaxel shook his head slowly. Your species is truly remarkable, Sergeant, and terrifying. After Zaxel left, Kyle lay back and stared at the ceiling. His body ached. His mind felt fuzzy from all the medications. But slowly, he was healing. A week after waking up, the doctors allowed him to walk. Kyle moved slowly through the ship's corridors, his left arm in a support brace, his ribs still wrapped. Every step hurt, but he pushed through it. Pain was temporary. He had learned that lesson well. He found Captain Grant on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She turned when he entered, her eyebrows raising. You should be in bed. I've been in bed for a week, ma'am. I needed to move. Grant smiled slightly. Still stubborn as ever, I see. Kyle stood beside her, looking out at the same view. Space stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and cold. They're saying I'm a hero, he said after a moment. News channels, other soldiers. Everyone wants to talk about what I did. You are a hero, Kyle. You saved 17,000 lives. I was just the one who stayed. Anyone else would have done the same. Grant turned to face him fully. No, Kyle. That's where you're wrong. Most soldiers would have retreated when ordered. You volunteered to stay when you knew it meant you would probably die. That's not normal. That's exceptional. I didn't feel exceptional. I felt scared. Being scared doesn't make you less brave. Being scared, and doing it anyway, is what makes you a hero. Kyle didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. In his mind, he had just done what needed to be done. There was nothing heroic about it. It was just the job. But everyone else saw it differently. The Calrithian government ceremony took place 2 weeks later. Kyle stood in dress uniform, his arm still in a brace, as officials from 3 different species praised his actions. They gave him medals. They gave him titles. They gave him honors that he didn't fully understand. Commander Zaxel personally presented him with the Star of Unbroken Will, the first time it had ever been awarded to a non-Calrithian. The medal was heavy in Kyle's hand, made of some alien metal that gleamed under the lights. Sergeant Morrison, Zaxel said formally. You have shown courage beyond measure. You have held when others would have fled. You have stood alone against impossible odds. The Calrithian people honor you as one of our own. Kyle accepted the medal with a simple nod. He gave a short speech, thanking everyone. But his words were plain and simple. He didn't talk about glory or honor. He talked about duty, about doing what was necessary, about the civilians who were alive because someone chose to stand. After the ceremony, Kyle found a quiet corner and looked at the medal. It was beautiful, in its way, but it felt wrong somehow. He hadn't done this for medals or glory. He had done it because it was right. Captain Grant found him there. Having trouble with all the attention? She asked. I don't deserve this, Kyle said quietly. I was just one soldier. There are thousands of others doing the same job every day. They don't get medals. You're right. They don't. But sometimes, one soldier's actions become a symbol. You've become that symbol, Kyle. You represent everything that makes humanity strong. Courage, determination, the refusal to give up. I don't want to be a symbol. Too late. Grant smiled gently. You held that platform for 3 days. The whole galaxy knows about it now. The Vex Thor fear humans more than they did before. The Calrithians trust us more. You changed how species see us. Kyle looked back at the medal. Maybe Grant was right. Maybe his stand had been about more than just buying time. Maybe it had shown the galaxy something important about humanity. Or maybe he was just a soldier who had gotten lucky. Either way, he was alive. The civilians were safe. The mission was complete. That was enough. What happens now, ma'am? Kyle asked. Grant's expression turned serious. Now you recover. Then Command wants to talk to you about your next assignment. They're talking about transferring you to Joint Operations Training. 6 months later, Kyle Morrison stood in front of a classroom filled with soldiers from 7 different species. The Joint Training Facility on Station Harmony was the largest multi-species military academy in the Allied territories. Kyle had been assigned here after his recovery, tasked with teaching advanced defensive tactics. He had never wanted to be a teacher. But Command didn't really give him a choice. Today, we're going to talk about defensive positions, Kyle began, keeping his voice level and clear. Specifically, how to hold a position when you're outnumbered and undersupplied. A Calrithian officer in the front row raised his hand. Kyle recognized him as Tralvin, the squad leader who had helped extract him from the platform. Yes, squad leader? Sergeant Morrison. Calrithian tactical doctrine says that when outnumbered 5-1, retreat is the only logical option. Yet you held against odds of over 1,000-1. How do we reconcile this? Kyle thought about the question. He had been getting variations of it for weeks now. Everyone wanted to know his secret. They wanted a formula, a tactical principle they could apply, but there was no formula. Logic only works when both sides follow the same rules, Kyle said. The Vex Thor expected me to behave logically. They expected me to retreat when the situation became impossible. Because that's what any rational soldier would do. But you didn't retreat, said another student, a human from the Colonial Defense Forces. No. I didn't. Because the mission wasn't about survival. It was about buying time. Every hour I held that platform was one more hour for those transports to escape. So I stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about time. Kyle activated the holographic display behind him. It showed the Epsilon 7 platform in 3 dimensions. Look at the station layout. It's not designed for one person to defend. Too many access points. Too many corridors. The Vex Thor should have been able to board from multiple directions and overwhelm me in minutes. So how did you stop them? Asked a young Calrithian female. I didn't try to defend the whole station. I made them come to me. Kyle highlighted areas on the hologram. I sealed off most of the corridors. Vented atmosphere in the outer sections. Collapsed entire decks. I turned the station from a complex battlefield into a simple one. A few choke points that I could actually defend. He zoomed in on the command center. Then I set up overlapping fields of fire. Every approach to the command center became a kill zone. The Vex Thor had to come through narrow passages where their numbers didn't matter. 1 or 2 at a time, I could handle that. The class watched intently as Kyle walked through his tactical decisions. He showed them how he had used the station's own systems as weapons, how he had rigged traps using damaged equipment, how he had conserved ammunition by forcing close-quarters combat where possible. But these tactics require sacrifice, Tralvin observed. You destroyed much of the station to create these choke points. You trapped yourself with no escape route. That's right, Kyle agreed. These aren't tactics for winning. These are tactics for not losing. There's a difference. A human officer in the back spoke up. Sergeant, you talk about this very calmly. But you were awake for over 70 hours. You were injured. You were running out of supplies. Weren't you afraid? Kyle was quiet for a moment. Yes, I was terrified. Every moment of those 3 days, I was scared. Scared I would fail. Scared I would die. Scared the transports wouldn't make it. Then how did you keep going? Because fear is just a feeling. It doesn't have to control your actions. I was afraid, but I was also determined. The determination was stronger. The class continued for another hour. Kyle walked them through scenario after scenario, showing them how to think about defensive positions differently. Not as places to hide, but as weapons themselves. How to use terrain, environment, and psychology against a superior force. After class, Commander Zaxel found Kyle in the instructor's office. Your teaching methods are unconventional, the Calrithian said. Is that a problem, sir? On the contrary. The students are learning things our traditional doctrine doesn't cover. You're teaching them to think like humans think. To be unpredictable. To refuse defeat even when defeat seems certain. Kyle filed away some data pads. I'm just teaching them what worked for me. It's more than that. Zaxel moved to the window, looking out at the station. Since the battle at Epsilon 7, the Vexel Thor have changed their tactics. They're more cautious when facing human positions. Your stand made them afraid. One battle doesn't win a war. No. But one battle can change how a war is fought. The Vex Thor thought they understood humans. Now they realize they don't. They don't understand why you fight the way you do. Why you refuse to surrender, even when logic says you should. Kyle joined him at the window. Outside, ships moved in the darkness, transports and warships from a dozen different species. The Allied territories were vast, diverse, complicated. I think they understand survival, Kyle said. They understand fighting to win. What they don't understand is fighting for something bigger than yourself. Those civilians on the transports, most of them I never met. I didn't know their names, but they were counting on me. That mattered more than my own survival. Zaxel turned to look at him with all four eyes. This is what makes humanity dangerous. Not your weapons. Not your ships. Your willingness to sacrifice everything for others. The Vex Thor fight for glory. The Calrithians fight for duty. But humans fight for each other. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Both. Zaxel said honestly. It makes you the best allies we could ask for. But it also makes you unpredictable. Difficult to work with sometimes. Kyle smiled slightly. Over the following months, Kyle's reputation grew. His classes became the most popular at the academy. Officers from every species wanted to learn from the human who had held Epsilon 7. Not just the tactics, but the mindset. The determination. Kyle found himself becoming a bridge between species. He helped Calrithian officers understand human aggression. He helped human soldiers understand alien caution. He showed them all that different approaches to war could work together. One day, a young human private approached him after class. The kid couldn't have been more than 20 years old, fresh from basic training. Sergeant Morrison, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Everyone talks about Epsilon 7 like you're some kind of superhero. But in class, you just seem like a regular person. How do I become like you? Kyle looked at the young soldier for a long moment. He saw himself at that age, eager and uncertain, trying to figure out what kind of soldier he would become. You don't want to be like me, Kyle said gently. What I did at Epsilon 7 that wasn't heroic. It was desperate. I survived by luck as much as skill. But you held against impossible odds. I held because I had no choice. The situation demanded it. If you want to be a good soldier, don't try to be a hero. Just focus on doing your job well. Train hard. Learn your equipment. Take care of your team. When the moment comes, if it comes, you'll know what to do. The private nodded slowly, absorbing the words. And one more thing, Kyle added. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what needs to be done anyway. Remember that. After the private left, Kyle sat alone in his office. He looked at the Star of Unbroken Will mounted on the wall, the Calrithian medal that had changed his life. Sometimes he still wondered if he deserved it, if what he did was really special or just necessary, but then he would remember the faces in his classes. The officers learning to think differently. The soldiers training harder. The species learning to trust each other more. Maybe his stand at Epsilon 7 had been about more than just buying time. Maybe it had been about showing what was possible when you refused to give up. His communicator beeped. A message from Captain Grant, who had recently been promoted to Admiral. She wanted to meet for dinner. Said she had news about a new assignment. Kyle smiled. Whatever came next, he would handle it. That's what soldiers did. They adapted. They overcame. They held the line. He stood, straightened his uniform, and headed for the door. Behind him, the medal gleamed on the wall, a reminder of 3 days that changed everything. Outside, the station bustled with activity. Humans and Calrithians working side by side. Former enemies becoming friends. A galaxy learning to stand together. All because one soldier decided that retreat would never be considered. Kyle Morrison walked through the corridors, nod. 5 years after Epsilon 7, the galaxy had changed. The Vex Thor swarm no longer pushed aggressively into Allied territory. The Calrithian human alliance had grown stronger, expanded to include 6 other species. Joint military operations had become standard practice. New defensive strategies, based partly on Kyle's tactics, were taught at every academy. Kyle Morrison himself had changed too. He was Major Morrison now, working in Joint Operations Command on the central station called Unity Point. His job was coordinating multi-species military operations across 3 sectors. It was a desk job mostly, filled with tactical meetings and paperwork. Nothing like the excitement of combat. He didn't miss combat at all. Admiral Lisa Grant had given him the promotion personally, along with a new assignment. "You've spent 5 years teaching soldiers how to fight," she had said. "Now I need you to teach commanders how to think." So Kyle had moved up the chain. He advised generals and admirals from different species. He helped them understand each other's tactics. He translated military doctrine between cultures that saw war completely differently. It was strange work for a man who had started his career as a simple rifleman. But Kyle adapted. That's what he did. On the 5-year anniversary of the Epsilon 7 battle, Unity Point held a memorial ceremony. Not just for Kyle's stand, but for all the soldiers who had died in the Vex Thor War. The names of the fallen were displayed on a massive holographic wall. Thousands of names. Thousands of lives lost. Kyle stood in the memorial hall, looking at the names of his original unit, the soldiers who had evacuated while he stayed behind. Most of them had survived the war. A few hadn't. War was like that, random and cruel. Commander Zaxel, now Admiral Zaxel, found him there. "Still thinking about that day?" the Calrithian asked. "Every day," Kyle admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. If maybe there was a smarter way to handle it. You saved 17,000 lives. How could that be the wrong choice? But what if I had died? What if the platform had fallen anyway? Would it still have been worth it?" Ming. A base buns. Ming. A base buns. Zaxel was quiet for a moment. "You're asking philosophical questions that have no answers, my friend. You made a decision based on the information you had. The outcome was positive. That's all any soldier can hope for." Kyle nodded. He knew Zaxel was right. But the doubts never fully went away. That was part of being human. Always questioning. Always wondering if you could have done better. The Vex Thor requested a meeting, Zaxel said, changing the subject. They want to discuss peace terms. Kyle looked at him sharply. Peace? After 15 years of war? They've realized they can't win. Not against our alliance. Your stand at Epsilon 7 was part of that realization. They thought humans were weak, easily frightened. You proved them wrong. One battle changed their entire strategic assessment, Zaxel interrupted. They studied what you did. They couldn't understand it. How could one soldier hold against such odds? It didn't fit their understanding of warfare. So they started studying humans more carefully. What they found scared them. What did they find? That your entire species fights like you did. When pushed to the edge, humans don't break. You become more dangerous, more determined. The Vex Thor realized that conquering humanity would cost them everything. So now, they want peace. Kyle processed this information. The war might be ending. Millions of lives saved. All because he had refused to retreat 5 years ago. It seemed impossible. Too big. One soldier couldn't change the course of a war. But maybe one soldier could start something. Could inspire others. Could show what was possible. Later that evening, Kyle attended the official memorial ceremony. Speakers from every species talked about sacrifice and courage. About the soldiers who had given everything for peace. About the alliance that had been built through shared struggle. Then it was Kyle's turn to speak. He walked to the podium, looking out at the assembled crowd. Thousands of faces. Military officers, government officials, civilians. All of them waiting to hear from the hero of Epsilon 7. Kyle didn't feel like a hero. He just felt like a soldier doing his job. 5 years ago, I was ordered to evacuate a defense platform, he began, his voice steady. I volunteered to stay behind instead. People ask me why. They want to know what was going through my mind. What special training or knowledge I had. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The truth is, I was terrified. I didn't want to die. I didn't have a grand plan or special tactics. I just knew that people needed time. Families were escaping. Children were getting to safety. And if I could buy them a few more hours, then that was worth doing. The crowd listened in silence. Everyone calls me a hero. But I'm not. I'm just a soldier who understood his mission. The real heroes are the civilians who survived. The pilots who flew those transports. The commanders who trusted me to hold. The Marines who came to extract me. I was just one part of something much bigger. Kyle looked at the names on the memorial wall. These are the real heroes. The soldiers who died protecting others. Who gave their lives so others could live. They didn't get medals or ceremonies. They didn't get to see the peace their sacrifice made possible. But they're the reason we're standing here today. He finished his speech simply. So when you remember Epsilon 7, don't just remember me. Remember all of them. Remember that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about doing what's necessary. Even when you're afraid. That's what every soldier here has done. That's what makes us strong. Axer. Linston. Axer. Linston. Axer. 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 The applause was thunderous. But Kyle barely heard it. He was looking at the names on the wall, thinking about the soldiers who would never come home. After the ceremony, a young Calrithian approached him. She couldn't have been more than 16 in human years, wearing a civilian education uniform. Major Morrison? My name is Kiravel. I'm one of the civilians you saved. My family was on Transport 7. Kyle looked at her. This young alien whose life he had changed without ever knowing she existed. I was 8 years old when we evacuated, she continued. I remember being scared. My mother told me that soldiers were protecting us, that we would be safe. I didn't really understand what that meant then. And now? Kyle asked gently. Now I'm studying military history at the academy. I want to serve in the Joint Operations Forces. Because of you. Because you showed me that one person can make a difference." Quote, Kyle felt something tight in his chest. This was the real legacy of Epsilon 7. Not medals or fame, but inspiration. The idea that courage mattered. That standing firm could change everything. "Then study hard," he told her. "Learn everything you can. And when the time comes, do your duty. That's all any soldier can do." Kiravel saluted him, and Kyle returned the gesture. She walked away, young and determined, ready to serve. Kyle watched her go and thought about the future. The war was ending. Peace was coming. A new generation would grow up in a galaxy where humans and Calrethians and all the other species worked together. Maybe his stand had been about more than just buying time. Maybe it had been about showing what was possible when different species trusted each other, when they fought for each other, when they refused to give up on each other. Admiral Grant found him later, sitting alone in the observation deck. "You did good today," she said. "I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do." Grant sat beside him. "The peace talks are starting next week. They want you there. As a symbol of human determination." "I'm not a symbol. I'm just a soldier." "You're both. You always have been." Grant looked out at the stars. "That's the burden you carry, Kyle. You can't just be a soldier anymore. You're an example, a reminder of what we're capable of when we refuse to surrender." Kyle thought about that. About the young Calrethian who wanted to serve because of him. About the officers he had trained. About the alliance that had been strengthened by his stand. "I miss the simplicity," he admitted. "When it was just me and a mission. No politics. No symbolism. Just doing the job. You can't go back to that. None of us can. The galaxy changed 5 years ago. You changed it. I didn't mean to. The best changes never are meant to happen. They just do. Because someone made a choice. You chose to stand. Everything else followed from that." They sat in silence for a while, watching the ships move through space. Military vessels and civilian transports. Warships and hospital ships. All of them working together, protecting the alliance. Kyle thought about Epsilon 7. About 3 days that felt like a lifetime. About the fear and pain and desperate determination. About holding when every instinct screamed to run. He wouldn't change it. Given the same choice again, he would stay. He would hold that line. Because that's what soldiers did. They stood where others couldn't. They held when others would retreat. And sometimes, if they were lucky, they lived to see the difference they made. "I'll go to the peace talks," Kyle said finally. "If they need me there, I'll go." Grant smiled. "But after that, I want a quiet assignment. Something boring. Paperwork and meetings and nothing dangerous. I'll see what I can do." They both knew she was lying. Kyle would never get a quiet assignment. His name carried too much weight. His example meant too much. He would spend the rest of his career in the spotlight, whether he wanted it or not. But that was okay. It was part of the job now. A different kind of duty. But duty, nonetheless. Kyle stood and looked out at the galaxy one more time. Somewhere out there, 17,000 people were living their lives, having families, building homes, creating futures, all because one soldier had stood his ground for 3 days. It wasn't about glory or honor. It wasn't about being remembered. It was about doing what was necessary when the moment demanded it. That's all it had ever been. And that, Kyle realized, was enough. The galaxy remembered Epsilon 7. It would remember for generations to come. The story would be told to young soldiers, learning their trade. To children, hearing tales of courage. To anyone who needed to believe that one person could make a difference. Major Kyle Morrison walked away from the observation deck, ready for whatever came next. Behind him, the stars shined bright and eternal. Witnesses to the stand that changed everything. And in the darkness of space, at the coordinates where Epsilon 7 once orbited, a memorial beacon marked the spot, a light in the void, broadcasting a simple message to any ship that passed. Here stood a soldier who would not retreat. Here began the alliance that brought peace. Remember Epsilon 7. Remember that courage endures. Oh way, oh way, oh way. The beacon would shine forever, a reminder that sometimes, one person standing in the right place at the right time can change the course of history. All they have to do is refuse to run. All they have to do is hold the line. And never, ever consider retreat. Ding at the soldiers he passed. They saluted him, and he returned the gesture. He was just a sergeant, just a teacher now, just a man who had done his job when it mattered most. But to them, he was something more. He was proof that courage existed, that determination could overcome impossible odds, that one person, standing in the right place at the right time, could make all the difference. And maybe, Kyle thought, maybe that was enough. The galaxy remembered Epsilon 7. It would never forget, and neither would he. Aching other species about human combat tactics, Kyle nodded slowly. He could do that. He could teach others what he had learned on that platform. Maybe some good could come from it. All right, he said simply. Grant put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, Kyle. Better than anyone had a right to expect. I'm proud of you. For the first time since waking up, Kyle allowed himself to smile. Thank you, Captain. In the medical bay, Kyle Morrison's heart monitor beeped steadily. Against all odds, despite everything his body had endured, he was stable. The doctors gave him a sedative, and finally, after 75 hours, he slept. But even in sleep, his hand remained clenched, as if still holding a weapon, still ready to fight, still refusing to retreat. Kyle Morrison took position at the entrance, weapon ready, and waited for them to come. He had held for 73 hours. 2 more hours would be easy. The Vex Thor poured through the breach, and Kyle met them with fire and fury. Above him, the Calrithian fleet fought desperately. Behind him, the station groaned and shuddered, dying piece by piece. But in the command center, one human stood his ground, and retreat was never considered. Done what an entire battalion couldn't do. He's held a critical position against overwhelming odds for 3 days. If he's willing to die for this station, then we're willing to fight for it. He looked back at the view screen, where the battered platform continued its lonely vigil. One human standing against the darkness. Besides, Zaxel added quietly, any species that produces soldiers like him deserves allies who won't abandon them. The Calrithian fleet moved forward, weapons charging, heading toward the coming battle. On the platform, Sergeant Kyle Morrison checked his ammunition count one more time, adjusted his grip on his weapon, and prepared for the next wave. He had held for 3 days. He would hold for 3 more if he had to, because retreat had never been considered.